A merchant standing on a wharf at Hedeby around the year 1000 could watch almost his entire fortune disappear beneath a few wet planks. His ship might be carrying iron bars, wool cloth, hides, amber, whetstones, barrels of food, and other goods gathered from several investors. If the cargo reached a distant market, the same hold could return with silver, wine glass, fine textiles, ceramics, and luxuries worth far more at home. But the ship had already consumed years of labor before it left the harbor. Timber had to be selected and shaped. Thousands of iron fastenings had to be made. Rope had to be twisted. A massive sail had to be woven. Crew had to be fed. Cargo had to be purchased. And every day of bad wind burned more provisions. The selling price at the destination might look impressive, yet one storm, one pirate attack, or one rotten plank could erase the ship, the cargo, and the credit behind both. So did owning a Viking trading ship create reliable wealth? Or did it simply concentrate a fortune into the most dangerous wooden box in Europe? The first mistake is to picture every Viking ship as a long, narrow war vessel packed with armed men. Raiders needed speed oars and space for warriors. Merchants needed something almost opposite. Their cargo ship, often called a knarr, was broader, deeper, and rounder. It sacrificed much of the longship's speed and rowing power in exchange for carrying capacity. That change in shape changed the economics completely. A warship could deliver fighters. A knarr could deliver weight. Heavy stone barrels, timber, iron, grain, livestock, and bulk textiles were difficult or absurdly expensive to move long distances over land. Put them on water, and a relatively small crew could move a load that would otherwise require carts, draft animals, drivers, fodder, roads, and repeated tolls. This was the merchant ship's first great advantage. It turned the sea into a low-friction highway. Archaeological reconstructions show the difference clearly. The coastal trader Skoldilev III could carry roughly 4.6 tons with a crew of only 5 to 8, while the larger ocean-going Skoldilev I type could carry around 20 tons. But a highway only matters when there's something valuable at both ends. Viking trade was not one single route and not one single business. A coastal trader might move food, wood, pottery, stone, animals, and cloth between nearby ports. An ocean-going knarr could connect Norway, Denmark, the British Isles, Iceland, Greenland, and major commercial centers farther south and east through wider networks. The goods changed by region. Furs and hides moved from colder lands. Amber came from the Baltic. Iron and whetstones traveled from areas with useful deposits and specialized production. Wool, rope, timber, fish, grain, wine glass, ceramics, silk, spices, and silver entered the system from different directions. Viking trading centers connected local products with imports from Western Europe, the Baltic, Byzantium, and Islamic trade networks. The merchant was not creating value by manufacturing every item. He was creating value by moving the right item from a place where it was common to a place where it was scarce. That sounds simple. It was not. Before a merchant could profit from price differences, someone had to create the ship. Archaeology gives us a sense of how large that investment could be. A reconstruction of the smaller Skoldilev III coastal trader required roughly 20,000 hours of handwork, with about 5,000 hours going to the rope work and hand-woven wool sail alone. That figure comes from a modern experimental reconstruction, not an invoice from the Viking Age, but it reveals the scale of labor hidden inside a vessel that looks simple from a distance. The whole demanded skilled boat builders, not just villagers with axes. Large oak logs had to be chosen for the natural curves and grain needed in keels, frames, and planks. Fresh wood was split and hewn, rather than cut into modern rectangular boards, which reduced waste and preserved strength but required judgment. Ironworkers produced rivets and roves. Caulkers sealed seams with fiber and tar. Rope makers prepared rigging that had to survive salt strain and weather. Textile workers produced the sail, and a large ocean-going knarr could carry a wool sail around 90 square meters. The ship was therefore not one product. It was the final assembly of several industries. This matters because the owner needed access to all of them at the same time. A farmer could grow wool, a smith could make iron fastenings, a boat builder could shape the hull, but very few ordinary households could command enough timber, iron, food specialist labor, and spare time to build a serious cargo ship without help. The barrier to entry was not simply money in the modern sense. It was control over resources and people. A chieftain or wealthy landowner had that control because land produced timber, food, wool, and labor obligations. A successful merchant might have silver and trade contacts. A group of partners could spread the burden by contributing different things. One supplied part of the ship, another supplied cargo, another sailed, another opened access to a foreign market. Shared ownership was not merely a convenient financial trick. It was a way to assemble a vessel from a society where wealth existed in many forms. One person might have silver, another had iron, another had livestock and wool, another had relatives in a port across the sea. Combined, those assets could become a trading voyage. But shared capital created shared problems. Who decided where the ship sailed? Who chose the cargo? Who paid when repairs exceeded the original plan? Who absorbed the loss if one investor's goods spoiled and another investor's silver survived? Trust was a business asset, and family ties, reputation, oath-taking, and political protection could matter almost as much as the ship itself. A stranger with enough silver might still struggle to enter the trade if no crew trusted him, no ruler protected him, and no overseas contact would sell to him on favorable terms. Once the hull was ready, the owner still had not created a business. He had created an expensive object that constantly tried to decay. Wood dried, swelled, cracked and loosened, iron corroded, rope wore through, wool sails stretched, absorbed water and needed repair. Tar and caulking had to be renewed. The Skoldilev 1 wreck, an ocean-going trader, shows repeated repairs using different woods and work performed in different regions. Maintenance was the Viking merchant's version of depreciation. The vessel lost value even while sitting ashore and faster when used hard. That created a seasonal rhythm. In northern waters, the best sailing months were limited. The owner had to inspect the hull, prepare the rigging, gather crew, purchase cargo, and leave when weather and markets aligned. Leave too early and cold or storms increased danger. Leave too late and the ship might miss the best prices, become trapped by winter, or sit abroad for months consuming food. Time was not just a schedule, time was inventory cost. Every day the cargo remained unsold, the owners had wealth locked in the hold rather than available for another transaction. The crew was smaller than many people expect. A coastal trader such as Skoldilev 3 could carry about 4.6 tons with perhaps 5 to 8 men. A larger ocean-going knarr, reconstructed from Skoldilev 1, could carry around 20 tons with a crew in the range of roughly 6 to 15. Compare that with a longship requiring dozens of rowers, and the business logic becomes obvious. Cargo ships used wind and hull volume to increase tons moved per person. That was their productivity breakthrough. A small crew, however, did not mean a cheap crew. Every useful man occupied space and consumed food and water. Evidence from ships and written sources suggests that sailors required significant water supplies, with some accounts indicating a minimum near 4 liters per person each day. Content reference index equals 6. Add bread, dried fish, meat, dairy products, tools, spare rope, sail repair material, bedding, weapons, cooking equipment, and personal goods. And some of the ship's theoretical capacity vanished before commercial cargo came aboard. A 20-ton vessel did not give the merchant 20 tons of pure profit, it gave him a capacity budget. Crew provisions, safety equipment, and ballast competed with saleable goods. The owner then faced a classic business decision: maximize cargo and reduce safety, or sacrifice cargo space to improve survival. Carry too much and the ship sat lower in the water, handled worse and took on more spray. Carry too little and the voyage might not cover its costs. The open hold created a packaging problem. Iron could tolerate conditions that ruined cloth. Furs could rot, grain could become wet, and salt water could turn profitable cargo into waste without sinking the ship. Merchants needed barrels, chests, wrappings, raised platforms, and careful loading. Heavy goods belonged low for stability. Fragile goods needed protection. High-value items needed security, and livestock moved. Loading was warehouse management inside a moving wooden bowl. Then came the most expensive item after the ship itself, the cargo. Modern viewers often imagine the merchant as someone who owned the vessel and casually filled it with surplus goods from his farm. That may have happened on small routes, but serious trade required concentration. A 20-ton hold could absorb the output of many households. The owner might purchase goods in advance, carry cargo for other people, take partners' merchandise, or combine all three. Each model changed the risk. If he purchased the goods outright, he kept the upside, but carried the full loss. If he transported goods for a fee, his margin was smaller, but he used less capital. If investors shared the cargo, he spread risk, but also divided the profit. The hidden strength of ship ownership was not only buying low and selling high, it was selling transportation. Empty hold space could carry other people's goods for a fee: passengers, messages, gifts for elites, craftsmen, animals, or supplies. The ship could earn before the owner risked much of his own inventory. The knarr was therefore a platform for trade, freight, migration, provisioning, diplomacy, and occasional military logistics. That flexibility protected the owner in weak markets. If amber prices were poor, perhaps grain, timber, livestock, or passengers still needed transport. If a distant luxury route looked too dangerous, coastal freight could keep the vessel active. But flexibility had limits. A ship could not be in two ports at once, and every detour consumed sailing days. The greatest profits often came from information, knowing where shortages existed before competitors arrived. A port that lacked grain after a poor harvest might pay well. A settlement with abundant furs but little silver might offer favorable exchange. A court preparing a feast might demand wine glass and fine cloth. The merchant who arrived first could capture the spread. The merchant who arrived second could discover that the shortage had already ended. This made information networks a form of capital. Relatives abroad, returning sailors, travelers, rulers, and market contacts provided signals about prices and security. The owner with the best hull but the worst information could still lose to a smaller operator who knew exactly what to carry. Payment added another complication. In much of the Viking world, silver was valued by weight, using scales, coins, cut coins, ingots, and jewelry fragments. That allowed foreign silver to circulate without trusting the face stamped on it, but it invited fraud. Was the metal pure? Were the weights honest? A merchant could complete a voyage and still lose margin at the scale. Barter was worse for liquidity. Wine or cloth might be valuable, yet difficult to use for food repairs or the next deal. Silver mattered because it could be divided, hidden, paid to craftsmen, and carried into another market. The goal of a voyage was often not simply to return with beautiful imports, it was to return with assets that remained useful in many markets. Market access was never completely free. Trading centers prospered when merchants believed they could operate safely, and that safety usually depended on power. A king chieftain, town authority, or local strongman could protect a harbor, regulate weights, collect dues, demand gifts, or seize cargo. The same political power that reduced piracy could become a cost. A merchant might pay tolls, harbor charges, tribute, customs, or informal payments. On eastern river routes, traders passed territories where rulers controlled choke points and took a share. On western routes, ports and rulers could impose their own demands. Historical evidence from trading centers such as Hedeby and Birka shows that security was essential because merchant ships and their cargo were tempting targets for pirates and raiders. The merchant was buying access to a network. Refused to pay, and the ship might be blocked, robbed, or excluded from the market. Pay too much, and the price difference that justified the voyage disappeared. Protection also depended on identity and relationships. A well-connected owner could receive better treatment, credit storage, and legal support. An outsider could be charged more or trusted less. That gave established merchants a compounding advantage. Successful voyages did not only create silver, they created reputation, contacts, and political value, which made future voyages cheaper and safer. Failure worked in reverse. A merchant who defaulted on partners or returned with damaged cargo could lose access to capital even if he kept the ship. Now consider an illustrative good year. This is not a surviving Viking account book, but a model based on the physical limits of the ships and the logic of long-distance trade. A group of investors prepares a medium or large cargo vessel. Part of the hold carries their own iron wool hides amber and other saleable goods. Another part carries freight for local producers, giving the owners an immediate fee or agreed share. The crew is kept lean but experienced. Weather is favorable. The ship reaches the first market without major damage. Rather than selling everything at once, the merchants exchange some bulk cargo for silver and some for compact high-value imports. They avoid loading the return voyage with goods that are impressive but difficult to sell. The ship then makes a second profitable stop, perhaps delivering freight or provisions along the way. It returns before the dangerous season. The hull needs routine work but no major rebuilding. In that year, the owners gain in 4 ways. They earn a margin on their own cargo, they collect freight income, they increase the value of imported goods by bringing them into a scarcer market, and they strengthen relationships that improve the next voyage. The ship appears enormously profitable, but gross sales are misleading. First subtract the cargo originally purchased, then subtract food containers' harbor costs, gifts, tolls, crew shares, replacement rope, sail repair, caulking, lost or spoiled goods, and the portion of the ship's value consumed by wear. Then divide what remains among investors. The owner who looked rich while unloading silver may discover that much of that silver already belongs to partners, craftsmen, crew, or creditors. Even in a good year, the ship's visible wealth was larger than the owner's true profit. Still, repeated good voyages could transform a household. Profits could purchase land, livestock, labor, weapons, jewelry, political support, and additional shares in ships. Land then produced more wool, food, timber, access, and surplus goods, lowering the cost of future voyages. This was the compounding engine behind maritime wealth. The ship created profit. Profit purchased productive assets, and those assets made the next ship cheaper to operate. That is why the people already wealthy had such an advantage. They could survive delays, hold goods until prices improved, and fund repairs without selling cargo at the worst moment. A poorer partner might be forced to accept an unfavorable settlement because his family needed food before winter. The same voyage could enrich the patient investor and disappoint the desperate one. Now consider the bad year. The ship leaves late because the sail requires repair. To recover time, the owners accept a heavy cargo and reduce spare provisions. Wind turns against them. A crossing that should take days stretches much longer. Food and water decline. Wet weather enters the hold. Several bundles of cloth absorb moisture. A barrel breaks. The crew throws part of the low-value cargo overboard to improve handling. They reach a harbor, but not the intended one, and the local market has little demand for what remains. The merchant sells some goods cheaply to purchase food and repairs. While waiting, he misses the seasonal market at his original destination. On the return voyage, a storm damages the steering gear and opens seams in the hull. The ship survives, but it arrives home late with spoiled cargo, unpaid obligations, and a repair bill large enough to consume the next season's capital. Nothing dramatic had to sink. The business could fail through a chain of ordinary problems. Delay caused extra consumption. Extra consumption forced an unplanned sale. The sale reduced cargo value. Reduced value prevented maintenance. Deferred maintenance increased the next voyage's risk. This is how a profitable ship became a debt trap. Total loss was worse. A wreck did not only destroy timber, it destroyed working capital, freight belonging to neighbors' imported goods promised to buyers, and perhaps the lives of the people who understood the route. Investors could lose several years of accumulated surplus in a single night. There was no modern marine insurance company spreading that risk across thousands of ships. Risk sharing happened through partnerships, divided cargo ownership family networks, multiple ventures, and political alliances. A rational merchant did not place every asset on one deck if he could avoid it, but many owners could not diversify. A ship was already a large concentration of wealth. Filling it efficiently encouraged even more concentration. The technology that made trade productive also made failure catastrophic. Piracy and raiding blurred the line between merchant and warrior. Trading ships were attractive targets because they carried compact wealth. Crews needed weapons, watch routines, and knowledge of safe ports. A trader might travel in convoy or under the protection of a powerful leader. He might also participate in violence when commerce offered no good deal. This does not mean every merchant was secretly a raider. It means the business operated in a world where enforcement was personal and opportunity could change at the shoreline. A ship capable of carrying wool one month could carry armed men or tribute the next. That flexibility reduced idle time but increased political danger. Trade partners became enemies. Rulers changed. Routes closed. War could raise prices and create demand, yet it could also make the market unreachable. The owner's greatest skill was balancing cargo timing, information, relationships, maintenance, and risk. Could the business scale? To a point. A successful owner could finance another ship or purchase shares in several vessels. Multiple ships reduced dependence on one hull and allowed different routes. But expansion also created management problems. Skilled crews were limited. Trustworthy captains were valuable. More cargo required more suppliers and more buyers. Two ships could double capacity, but they could also double the number of people able to cheat, steal, delay, or make a bad decision. Viking trade networks scaled through partnerships and reputation, rather than through a modern corporation with written reports from every branch. The merchant's network was his management system. The final answer, then, is that a Viking trading ship could create real and lasting wealth. But not because every cargo produced a spectacular markup, The durable profit came from combining several advantages: cheap movement of heavy goods, a small crew relative to carrying capacity, access to information, trusted partners, political protection, freight income, and the ability to reinvest gains into land and more shipping. The best positioned owner was not a lone adventurer with a borrowed axe. He was someone who already controlled resources or belonged to a network that did. He could wait out a bad market, repair the hull, compensate partners, and sail again. The people who carried much of the daily danger were the crew laborers, small suppliers, and poorer investors whose income depended on one successful season. Owning the ship offered the highest upside, but it also placed responsibility for every hidden cost on the same balance sheet. The knarr was one of the most productive business tools of its age. It could move several tons with a handful of sailors and turn regional shortages into silver. Yet its efficiency came with a brutal weakness. The ship gathered timber, labor, cargo credit, and human lives into one exposed point of failure. Viking merchants did not become wealthy simply because they were bold enough to cross the sea. They became wealthy when they were rich, connected, disciplined, and diversified enough to survive the voyage that did not come home.